Good afternoon, Numi Nation. Ben here from the vault, the NuMinds vault, our 4 o'clock slot on NuMinds TV. Today we have a classic little activity and lesson from our course, Aesthetic Astronomy. Okay, now those two words don't always go together. I mean, there's a little alliteration there. So do you know what alliteration is? Alliteration is when the two words back to back have the same front sound, right? Not always necessarily the same letter. That's why you have to distinguish. So Aesthetic Astronomy is a course that we ran way back in the day in Camp Pursuit, and we've been running it many times since because it's so popular. It keeps evolving and getting updates with new projects injected. Okay, so who here loves space? I do. I've always loved space. Ever since I was a little kid, I would look up at the night sky and I would just be mesmerized. I would think about the planets in our own solar system. And then my mind would go a little bit further. I would think about the galaxy that we're in. And then, as I learned more and more about like the structure of our universe, my mind would go even further and I would think about the galaxies next to our galaxy and beyond and beyond. And nowadays there are these mind-blowing animations they have that they pieced together from images like from the Hubble telescope and things like that, that kind of take you on a journey from planet Earth, itsy bitsy planet Earth, and then you kind of scope out into the wider universe and it just gives you some perspective. Okay, so first of all, before I talk a little bit about like aesthetic and astronomy and how they go together, the supplies for today. So if you're watching this live, don't worry, you may not be able to scramble and get everything together in time for the lesson itself. But that's okay. You can go to NuMinds TV, or you can even just hang out here on Facebook until the video live set stream is over, replay it, pause it all you want. But here's what you need for today's project activity, which we'll get to maybe in about 8 minutes is the goal, okay? You need one clear jar or plastic bottle. It can even be an empty water bottle. A smaller one is probably best, but an empty, clear bottle or jar. You can get super creative, right? Something like this. Some cotton balls. Now you can see that I have mine already shredded. If you have some cotton balls at home, they might still be in ball form. So as we get to the project, you're going to shred them into shreds. Okay. So the cotton balls. You need paints, 2 or 3 different colors. I know. You're not at school. You're not in an art shop. So you're just going to have to use what you got, right? So it looks like we just posted the supplies here in the comments as well, but I'm just going to show you. I just happened to grab blue, yellow, and orange because I think they're a cool combo together. And I wasn't planning for this either, folks. So when I came home from the NuMinds office about a week and a half ago, I didn't think I better grab as many supplies as possible to give some awesome STEAM lessons. So I'm just digging around my own house and seeing what I got. And these paints are going to do the trick. So you need a couple color paints. If you got it, I know this might be a big ask, but if you got it, some glitter. Okay. You can see I grabbed yellow and some kind of like a silvery blue. Okay. And some water. I just grabbed an empty bottle and put some water in it. You're going to need it to pour into the other jar later in the project. And then something to stir. So these could be chopsticks. They could even be sticks from your backyard. They could be spoons. They could be whatever you got that will do the stirring kind of work. So don't worry about that. So those are the supplies. So if you're watching the video, now might be a good time to pause and go grab the things that you need, and you can adapt as needed. But what I want to talk about now is these 2 words, right? So let me flip things around here a little bit. I'm going to share my screen because we're going to dig into some ideas, and I need some help from you to change how we think about art and how we think about science. Okay? I'm going to need your help. So now, in just a moment, you'll be seeing me and my screen, and I want to talk a little bit about this idea of how science and art can get along and be friends, right? So there's this idea that somehow science and art are 2 very different things, that they're almost like can't get along, because science is all about like objective facts about matter, about this kind of physical truth in front of us, about advancements, in technology and things like that. And art is more kind of ephemeral. It's kind of like out there. It's just the imagination, intuition, things like that. That's only very, very partly true. In reality, art and science can get along really well. First, I'm going to show you a couple of quotes from scientists, and I want these quotes to help us think about how art and science, might actually get along much better than we think they do. So this is a quote from Plato, very famous philosopher, and he says, "Astronomy compels the soul to look upwards and leads us from this world to another." I love that because it takes this science, this field of science, which is astronomy, the study of the stars, the study of the cosmos, and the stuff out there, right? So in that sense, it is really a hard science. But at the same time, the way he describes it, it almost sounds like we're about to go on an amazing journey, right? Compels the soul to look upwards and leads us from this world into another, like I'm going into a new world. It's amazing. It sounds like I'm in one of Mr. Adams' Dungeonverse sessions or something, right? Like I'm going to totally transport into a new universe. Now that sounds fun. That sounds more than just kind of like dry, boring science and formulas and things like that. So I like that. Let's look at another one. So, aesthetic. Okay, so at the beginning of the session, I talked about these two words going together. Aesthetic and astronomy. So astronomy is a study of the stars and the cosmos, right? And aesthetic has to do with thought and emotion, like how our thoughts and emotions react to a stimulus, to something out there. So I think when you think about the way Plato described astronomy, I think he already described aesthetic astronomy. In the beginning, when I talked about being a kid and just being totally hypnotized, when I just let myself really, really go deep in my imagination, when I looked up at the night sky, that's an aesthetic response too. It's giving us a deep thought and a deep emotional reaction. And that's how these two things go together super well. So I can see NuMinds admin there is asking anyone participating, what do you feel when you look at the stars? Like, what is your aesthetic response when you look at the stars? Okay, let's look at some others. Okay, this is Albert Einstein, right? Can you get more sciencey than Albert Einstein? He is a person who had his mind wrapped deep into the cosmos, right? He understood astronomy as well as anybody from a cosmological point of view. Here's what he says. The most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. It is the source of all true art and all science. He to whom this emotion is a stranger, who can no longer pause to wonder and stand wrapped in awe, is as good as dead. His eyes are closed. Wow, those are harsh words from Mr. Einstein. He's basically saying, hey, scientists, if you have completely lost your imagination, if you have completely lost the ability to look at the sky, at the universe, and be filled with awe, then you're dead. Yikes. His words, right? So there's this understanding that even the greatest scientists have an aesthetic response to the world around them when they're doing their science, right? And according to Einstein, it's actually really important. So that's how this aesthetic and astronomy go together. Here's a Nobel Prize winning chemist. I would certainly not separate aesthetics from science. The process that I used and the responses that I felt were more like those of an artist than a scientist. Like my little scientist accent. That's like my 1950s scientist accent. Okay. So yeah, he says basically the same thing as Einstein, that when he approaches the world, he approaches it more as an artist than a scientist. Like the two go together. You can't really separate them. And finally, I want to show you this graph. Like if your parents aren't there with you, have them come see this. This is amazing. So this is data, that shows, of the percentage of scientists, regular scientists and Nobel Prize winning scientists who like or love some form of art, who excel at some form of art, right? So you can see, for example, the orange bars in this graph represent the Nobel Prize winning scientists. The blue is the general population, what percentage, okay? And then the red are, quote, I'm just putting this in quotes, regular scientists. Okay, so look at this. The arts, 15, 16, 17 to 18% of Nobel Prize winning scientists are into the arts, some form of arts, right? Look at the regular scientist population, about 10%. Look at crafts. Let's look at music, because this is blowing my mind. So 25, maybe pushing towards 30% of Nobel Prize winning scientists love music. And if we broke down this data, it would be like they play an instrument. So like they play the violin or the piano, or they have some kind of musical creative outlet. Look at regular scientists in blue, like 4%. That's a huge difference. And all across the board, every single art form, those scientists who also indulge and love and nurture the arts are the ones who are winning the Nobel Prizes, which is kind of like the top of the game for scientists. I think that's pretty cool. And I think that tells us when we're studying science and doing science like astronomy, we should be doing art alongside it. And vice versa. When we're doing art, let's incorporate science. Let's mix it all together. That's STEAM, and that's also the NuMinds way. Okay? So from there, what I want to do is I need a little help. This is where I'm going to need some interaction from our participating audience. I got some NuMinds friends on there, and hopefully they can help me out. So what I have here is, you've probably seen these in school. It's a little Venn diagram, and you can say I titled it Science and Art as Friends. They're not enemies. Sometimes they're frenemies, I'll admit. But in this case, we want them to be friends. So I want to just think a little bit about, what are the differences and, more importantly, the similarities between these two very important fields. Okay, so you're going to help me with this a little bit, and then we're going to dive into a project to exemplify all this. We're going to get deep into an example of what we're talking about, how science and art can go hand in hand. Okay, so there's a tiny bit of a lag on what I'm saying right now and what you guys are seeing. So the comments may lag a little bit, but that's no problem. So I'll get us started while I wait for comments to come in. So when I think just science, for example, I think, science, you guys know this from science class. There's a lot of formulas involved, right? And you tend to use like a lot of logical reasoning. Okay? Whereas in art, we tend to think of it, and again, this is just surface level, we tend to think of, as opposed to logical reasoning, we think of like intuition, right? Imagination. But what we're learning already is that some of these may not belong just in one side or the other, that they could actually go hand in hand. So I'm going to pause there, and I'm not afraid of awkward silences. So I'm going to see who can help me out right here. Help me think of ways or aspects of science that kind of like just belong to science and not art. And help me think of aspects of art that belong to art but not necessarily science. Or if you've got one that you think belongs to both already, let me know. Okay, I'm just going to hang here for a minute and kind of like dream about the stars while I'm waiting for the comments to roll in. I know we've got Mr. Adam on there. Miss Shay from NuMinds is watching. Mr. T himself. Okay, and while I'm waiting, I'll read one of Mr. T's earlier comments. He says, nothing nebulous about Nebula in a bottle. This one is never the same and worth repeating. Yeah, exactly. So this is a classic NuMinds activity. It's always a winner, because exactly like Mr. T said, it always turns out different, for not just every time you do it, but every single person who does it. Is fascinating. All right, we've got a first comment. Mr. Adam chimes in. He says, just on the just science side, balancing chemical equations. Yeah. So very similar to what I was thinking with formulas. I like how you brought in chemistry, and like, I'm just going to save space, I'm going to put balancing equations and not the whole thing. But actually, I can maybe, while I'm waiting, I can make this font a little smaller too. Yeah, good one, Mr. Adam. Thank you. All right, what else? Who's got something on either side or the both? Silence is golden, friends. 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 Silence is Pretty cool Venn diagram too, by the way. That's an app called Canva. You can do all kinds of graphic design. Speaking of art, okay. Okay, all right, we've got a both. Someone has chimed in with a both. Biomechanical engineering. So an example, Hugh Herr's prosthetic limb design innovation. Okay, so I love this. So what I'm going to do to shorten that, because you can see I don't have a lot of space here, is I'm going to shorten that to do, just call it engineering design. And I'll change the font too, because absolutely right. Absolutely right. When you are doing anything, when you're engineering anything that's going to be used by the public in some way, aesthetics matter, like the look and the feel and the use of it matter quite a bit, okay? All right, so Mr. T has chimed in with a just science. He says genetics, okay. Yeah, thinking about genetics. Like you don't necessarily consider genetics. Okay. All right, so Mr. Adam just chimed in again with a just art. He says sketching characters, but I'm going to argue, okay, sketching characters, yes, right? Characters, yes, but I'm going to take a little bit broader point of view and say sketching itself is something that belongs to both, and I can prove it even at Camp Pursuit. Sometimes we talk a lot about how great minds throughout history have used journals. And a lot of those scientists do a lot of sketching in their journals. So, you didn't mean to, Mr. Adam, but that was a perfect setup for another both. That's sketching. Okay? And I'm gonna speed it up just a little bit so we can get to the craft here, to the activity. But another one, and this is probably the most important thing that goes in both, would be what are they really after? What is science ultimately after? Some kind of truth, right? Now, from a science point of view, that truth is very, absolute, it's very material, it's very provable and repeatable. But at the same time, what is art ultimately about? Expressing what? Expressing some kind of truth. It might be an emotional truth or a philosophical truth, even a religious truth. But ultimately, both science and art are after capturing our world by describing it as some kind of truth, right? So I'm going to write seek the truth here in the middle, okay? So thank you for helping me think through that. And, Venn diagrams are such a great tool to help us contrast things, but also understand how they have similarities that we might not imagine. So here's what we're going to do. So this activity is called Nebula in a Bottle. One reason is because in all the cosmos out there, one of the most fascinating things to see, and we can't see them with our bare eyeballs, unfortunately, but thanks to the Hubble telescope and other marvels of technology and engineering, we can have images of these things. And one of them is the nebula. Okay, so definition, a nebula is an interstellar cloud of dust, hydrogen, helium, and other ionized gases. Originally, the term was used to describe any diffuse astronomical object, including galaxies. But now we know it's a more specific thing, right? Okay. So nebulas are fascinating because they're often called like the nurseries of stars, the nurseries of planets, because everything that we're made of, everything that planet Earth and all the planets in our solar system are made of, all the stars were born in a nebula. All the mass and material that makes up the universe starts in a nebula. It's like the birthplace of all matter, right? That's super fascinating. That's level 1. Level 2, look at some of these images of nebulas. They're mesmerizing. Tell me that this is not art. Tell me that this is not, absolute art right there created by nature. It's mesmerizing. You can even see shapes. So there are some famous nebulas that are actually named after the shape that they are, right? There's kind of the Horsehead Nebula is one. Tell me that doesn't look like an eyeball. Tell me that does not look like an eyeball, straight from Lord of the Rings or something like that. Mr. Adam can probably even use that in his dungeon verse. I mean, look at some of these nebula images, the colors, the patterns, the shapes. It's absolutely fascinating. So one thing you could do when you're studying nebulas is you could go deep into research into all those things that make up the nebula. And you could talk about the composition, including, like we said a second ago, dust, hydrogen, helium, ionized gases. And that's really important. It's really important to understand those aspects of a nebula. But it's also important to express a different way of understanding them, which is exactly how beautiful and mesmerizing they are. And that's where this project comes in, okay? So that's what we're going to do, is do an activity called Nebula in a Bottle, okay? So if you got those materials earlier, now it's time to get them out. I'm going to switch your view again so you can see a bigger version of me, and I'm going to adjust the screen so that you can see in front of me, okay? So now it's time to get those materials out, okay? So I've got my jar, remember the empty jar? So the way this works is those cotton balls that you had, what you're gonna do if you haven't shredded them already is just kind of shred them nice and thin and wispy. Think like galactic clouds, kind of wispy, okay? So I'm just gonna shred, and I'm gonna put a little layer of them, kind of like fluffed up, don't pack them too tight. They'll take care of themselves. I'm going to put a layer of them there in the bottom of the jar. Okay. But then what I'm going to do is give it some color and some pizzazz. Okay. So if you remember, I had 3 color paints. So I'll kind of put those at the top here. I think I'll start with blue. So I'm going to take my blue paint. I've got my stick, okay? I'm just going to get some of that blue paint down there into my nebula. And like I said, I did not have the luxury of going to the art store and buying the perfect runny paint for this. I'm just using what I got. I'm adapting. Growth mindset. Like Mr. T said earlier in the comments, every time you run this project, it turns out differently and you get new surprises. So we'll see what happens with this one. Okay. So there, I've got some blue color in there. So what I want to do, I'm going to set that aside for a second, and time to put some glitter in. What do you think that glitter might represent in our nebula? Just think about that. Think about the qualities of glitter and the qualities of what's inside a nebula, what comes from a nebula, and how they might connect, okay? So what I'm going to do is just not, you can be generous, but don't overdo it because you don't want to overpower your nebula. But here's some glitter, okay? Here's some glitter. And then I'm going to set the glitter aside again, and it's time to get my water bottle, okay? There's not a product placement, it just happened to be the bottle that I had. Get the water bottle, and time to add some water in there. Now that cotton's going to just absorb. That's okay. That's what we want it to do. We want that cotton to absorb. Okay. Then it's time for another layer. So what I'm going to do is keep shredding and packing. Okay. And what I'll do for this one is I'll use our stick to get that paint spread around in there. Okay. This time I think I'll go with yellow. So I'm going to open our yellow paint here. Kind of clumpy, but no problem. Yeah, Mr. Justin chimed into my last question. He says, I asked what might that glitter represent inside a nebula? After we discussed the nebula, like what it's composed of, what's going on, what comes from it, what's born from it. And remember, one of the things born from it is stars, and stars are comprised of that dust that comes from the nebula. So that glitter can represent that stardust, right? So let's get this. I'm going to use this time to get that paint kind of spread around, give it that nice effect. And don't worry, we will put some more stardust in there as well. Okay. Little messy, but not too messy. And again, when I left the office a week and a half or so ago, I did not know I'd be doing this project. So I just had to scrounge together what I could in my own home and make it work and see if I could make a cool project. Oh, look, I got some yellow glitter. So let's get some yellow stardust. Okay, a good tip from Mr. T out there in the comments. Careful with the glitter, Numies. It's often tiny shards of glass. Avoid too much spillage in fingers and eyes. Good, thank you for the safety heads up. Always being alert. You don't necessarily need the goggles on for this one, but good point, Mr. T. Take it easy with the glitter. You don't want it on the floor, on the table, on the dog, right? Okay, let's get some more water going. See how it turns out. Now, you have to kind of balance out the size of your jar with the amount of cotton that you have. And it looks like I might have too much jar for my cotton, but hopefully I'll still get a good galaxy in a bottle effect. Okay, I have some more. I'm going to use the rest of my cotton and use my third color and see what I can do with my galaxy. If I had little kids at home like Mr. Justin, I could get some real live kids to do the project, but in this case, I just have to do it. All my kids are older. Okay, that's the last of my cotton. That's all I had at home. I had to scrounge for the cotton, to be honest with you. Okay, this is like an odd kind of pinkish orange. So let's see what this might add. Okay, get the little bit more paint in there. Let's go back to the silver glitter for some more stardust. Whoop! I almost broke Mr. T's recommendation there. Okay, let's get some more water in there. Need that galaxy kind of swirling around. Okay, and then you stir it. You want that cotton to kind of just spread out thin. Yeah, look, I have to admit, it's looking kind of pretty. Looking kind of pretty along the side there. Now, sometimes a thin, like this is the jar that I had, but sometimes a thin. Mr. Justin says I can borrow his girls anytime. All right. I might take you up on that once we're off quarantine here. Okay. So what you can do is sometimes you just do a little stirring. Sometimes you don't even need stirring and you just look and it's like, wow. Wow. I love the look of this. It looks like a nebula. Okay. Other times you're not quite satisfied and you're like, well, I'm just going to try to shake this thing up and see what happens. So this is what mine looks like now. You can see it's got some cool effects going on. It's really hard to see through the camera, but you can kind of see some nebula action going on. Like Mr. T said earlier, it just turns out a little bit different every time. It depends on which paint you have, what type of paint, what colors, how much glitter, the shape of the jar. There's just so many factors. But you can see my jar was, what did I get my jar? Some artichoke hearts, okay? So this happened to be this shape. So what I'm going to do, what I was saying is, if you're not quite happy with how it turns out like this, and you just want to experiment, and I got nothing to lose, you can get the lid on and give it a little shake up. See what happens. Sometimes that helps. All right? And let's see what I got. Yeah, interesting. It looks like a cosmic cloud of stardust in future planets, right? It's pretty cool stuff. It's pretty fun. So, like I said, you're going to have to adapt this one. You're going to have to adapt this one to what you have around your house. If you've got, I'm going to push back up so you guys can see me for the close here. All right. If you've got some kind of jar, it can even be a plastic water bottle that's empty. Smaller the better, but even a big plastic water bottle. Raid all the cotton. Get permission, of course. Get permission from your parents. Some kind of paints, some glitters, some water, something to stir. And here's the important thing, coming back to the original point here. When you're exploring science, you can explore the truth of science through the aesthetics, through the art, right? Art and science are friends, and they should always play well together because, as Albert Einstein says, that's really the doorway to the universe, is where the science and the imagination come together. Okay? All right, Numi Nation. Thanks for tuning in to NuMinds TV, real inspired learning for everyone. And remember, you got to pursue your passion until it becomes your talent. All right, Numi Nation. I'll see you soon.